Ministry to Children in Crisis, Module 6, Psychological and Developmental Considerations of Children in Grief. Module 6, Learning Objectives. Number 1, to be able to explain the common developmental reactions to death by age. You will want to articulate and explain developmental reactions and responses and interventions from birth all the way through adolescence. Number 2, to evaluate death of a goldfish video as it relates to concrete language in speaking to children. I want you to concentrate on how, as we look at this Mr. Rogers' neighborhood video about the death of a fish, I want you to consider how he relates to young children as a model in how to speak with children who grieve. Number 3, to describe the 3 psychological and developmental tasks that are concerns for adolescents beyond the normal process of grieving. These developmental tasks are important for every adolescent, but it's complicated whenever a child or adolescent is going through grief at the same time. So I want you to be able to talk about that. As we consider how to help as pastoral caregivers or as a church, at first glance the task is daunting. In the United States, each year 12 million Americans experience the death of a parent. When we narrow this group to include only that of children, we find that in the United States, the yearly prevalence rate for experiencing the death of a parent or primary caregiver based on the U.S. Census is approximately 2.5 million children under the age of 18. As we seek to provide pastoral care to children, we must consider not only the age of the child, but more importantly, the developmental, emotional, and social understanding he or she possesses. As one writer by the name of O'Connor puts it, your child's developmental understanding of death depends on their age, cognitive development, life experience, and the amount of truthful information they have received, especially from the adults around them. It would be helpful to our study to consider some generally accepted concepts concerning children and loss. I like the statement from Alan Wolfelt, who says, a bereaved child's life is like a piece of paper upon which every caring adult has the dangerous opportunity to leave its mark. We want to consider the developmental reactions to death by age. We'll start first with infancy. We're including infancy here, those children from 0 to age 2. At this time, an infant has no cognitive understanding of death, but may respond to parental reactions to loss. That's a statement from the Compassionate Friends. Researchers are finding out more and more about infant memory, which would be a good topic for study for someone outside of the scope of our purpose here. Responses this age: cries easily and clings to parents, experiences a regression sometimes of toilet habits in the older age group, has more digestive and stomach upsets as well. What do we do What are the interventions? Number one, provide consistent, secure routine. Physical, nurturing contact, holding the child. The child will want to know about the event as he or she gets older. So that's why rituals, mementos, keepsakes at this age will be very helpful. As a child gets older, those can be brought out as their cognitive ability allows them to understand more and more as they age. At this age, activities such as the peekaboo game, covering the face with one's hands and opening it and crying out peekaboo, shows a young child's awareness of being and non-being. Another example would be that of placing a cloth lightly over a baby's face, and observe how he or she forcibly will remove the covering and searches for the parent's face for reassuring smiles. The child will then want to repeat the game again and again. And though the child is not consciously thinking about being and non-being, about death and living, the dynamics of separation and reunion are present, and thus begins the learning process. Robert Cassandon tells the story of a 16-month-old boy who was out walking with his father and observed a creeping caterpillar. It was not long until he also observed an unseen adult foot step squarely on this caterpillar. Squish! The boy looked at what was left of the caterpillar, and finally, in a tone of thoughtful certainty, said, "No more." Other children of about this age have been heard to summarize parallel situations with the idea of all gone. It is arguably that even infants have some awareness of being and non-being, of me and not me. The second group would be that of preschoolers, and we are giving this group of age of 2 to 4 years old. Disruption experienced as loss of parental presence at this age. At this age, the child sees death as temporary or reversible, and they need explanation as to what death means. At this age, children observe the behavior of adults and react to the emotions of others around them. We need to also think about the cartoon characters they watch on TV. When I was growing up, I remember the cartoon of character of the Roadrunner. You might recall, perhaps they're still being rerun at this day, but Wile E. Coyote, as he chases after the Roadrunner, he never does catch him, and he'll fall over the cliff. He can be blown up, smashed, poisoned, launched, impaled, and squished into an accordion a zillion times over, yet he still lives. Cartoon characters who come back to life again and again reinforce the notion that death is something temporary, almost funny to young children. Their responses of loss of a loved one at this time, they may regress into more infantile behaviors. And they will ask repeated questions about the person who died. Why is this? They want to be sure that the answer is still the same as it was 5 minutes ago. So I ask you again, and if you tell me the same answer, it reassures me of what I just heard. So we need to repeat it. Not get frustrated, but repeat it again and again. It becomes especially fearful of being separated from parents, perhaps at this time, or shows no concern over the death. So there are two extremes there. Interventions provide consistent routine. This can be a time when grandma or aunt or another family member can be of tremendous help to the family to come in and provide simple and concrete explanations. Routine. Allow the child to attend the funeral if they wish. We don't want to force it, but give them appropriate support during this time. We'll talk later about legacy building in Module 8 of how we can help the child as they grow older to have rituals and keep memories alive of their loved ones. Young elementary. This age group, we're given the ages from 5 to 9. At this age, children begin to accept the fact that someone has died. Death is reversible, still not permanent. Many have experienced the death of a hamster or a pet fish, but death is still seen as an impersonal force and something that happens to others and not to them, not to the child. It's a time of magical thinking, a time when nobody dies in their world. Earl Grollman writes, between 5 and 9, children accept the idea that a person has died, but may not understand as it is something that will happen to everyone, and particularly to themselves. Responses: they will demonstrate high anxiety surrounding the death. Sometimes becomes unwilling to talk about the death, or may talk openly and attempts to understand, asking those questions over and over. Sometimes experiences intermittent grieving, may have sleep disturbances. Interventions for adults: listen to needs and provide open, honest answers to the child. Use words dead and death when referring to the passing of a loved one. Help the child keep daily routines. At this age, you'll want to include in funeral planning and rituals to the degree that the child wants to be included. Give the child a choice to attend the funeral or to help in making arrangements, should they desire. Read age-appropriate books. Also, we'll be discussing, again, some of these important resources in Module 8. You might want to draw a picture of the family, what it was like maybe before the loved one died, and then maybe have them draw a picture of what it's like after their loved one died, or just simply say, draw a picture of the family. And then you can observe, do they include the loved one or exclude them? If it's a parent, are they included in the picture, or are they somewhere else off to the side of the picture? And that will give you an indication that they are understanding something about presence and absence of the loved one. At this time, mementos can be given of the loved one that has passed, that has died. Maybe a locket or a special item that belonged to grandpa or dad or mom as a keepsake for them. They may even want to draw a picture or have a keepsake that belongs to them that they might want to give to be buried with the loved one. In today's funerals, I've noticed that in caskets there are sometimes little special memento drawers that are in the top of the inside of the casket where special items can be placed, or a letter. That might be very, very meaningful for a child at this age group that can eventually be buried with the loved one, and that will help them with a kind of a closure for them. So at this time, I'd like for you to stop and review the video clip from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's Season 7, Episode 1, entitled Death of a Goldfish. I've edited the video. about 10 to 15 minutes long, where it shows how Mr. Rogers uses this event. He actually walked into his studio and noticed that a goldfish, or I think it really is a guppy, that was on the bottom of the aquarium, and the people in the studio that were working were going to remove it. He says, no, we're going to allow this to be the show for today. And so they created a whole show around this event, and he tells the children about that. And so I want you to note how he speaks to preschool and younger elementary age children in this video. And after you view the video, then come back and we'll continue looking at the developmental reactions of the other children. The age of older elementary, I'm giving the age of 9 to 10. During this age, children begin to see death as something permanent and lasting, final. However, these children still don't believe death is something that will happen to them. To these children, death is developmental, seen as an impersonal force, such as the angel of death or the grim reaper, may have seen in cartoons or in movies or video clips, maybe as a ghost, or some evil force that can take people away. Children of this age, however, begin to take death more seriously. And at this time, they might even want to carefully plan and perform graveside services for a dead animal or pet, such as a hamster or a dog. I know whenever my niece's dog died, she wanted to have a funeral, and so my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, they all got dressed like they were going to a service. Even had some things to read. They dug a hole in the backyard, put up a marker, and even said some words. It was very meaningful for the child at age 9 to be able to do that. Responses: they may be curious about the biological aspects, and reasoning is concrete here. And so it's important to give honest answers as we're speaking, not use euphemisms. We'll talk about that later. but to use those terms, dead and dying, talk about, even the process of what it means to stop breathing and how the body needs air to breathe, things like that. May experience learning problems at this stage, maybe more attentive, more clingy to those that are surviving parents or grandparents. May have excessive guilt, especially if they wished something. That's magical thinking. If they wished something to happen and it did, and they think they have that kind of power, you might want to talk about that. We really don't have that kind of power. Or they might be in denial about what happened. Headaches, abdominal pain, aggressive, destructive behavior might be seen as well. Interventions during this time: give honest responses and reassurance. You'll want to include in funeral rituals, again, as much as possible. Allow them to talk about death frequently if needed. You want to validate the child's emotions, that they're real because they are their emotions. Provide simple education about death. Affirm religious and cultural beliefs. You may ask some questions about faith and life and death, and heaven, hell, things like that. I remember my friend in college by the name of Ann. Whenever I was doing research, she shared with me that her son, age 8, he was 8 years old when her husband died, and he was excited whenever she asked him to help with the planning of the funeral of his father. So he chose the spray for the family that went on top of the casket. He was able to help select the casket for the burial. He had a part in selecting the music that also would be performed during the service. So later on, he's now out of college, has a family of his own, and she said that he's often told her how important that was to him as a young child to be able to have a part in that. So, video number 2. I would like for you to stop at this point and view a little clip from the now rerun TV show Everybody Loves Raymond. This comes from season 5, episode 5, entitled Pet Cemetery, when little Allie's hamster dies and the family plans a funeral in the backyard. So I'd like for you to see that and to see how important it is to this little 9-year-old. She's either 9 or 10 years old in the TV show, but I think it's important. It's one of the shows that seems a little more thoughtful, maybe gives some pretty good lessons on how the family takes apart and takes seriously the loss that this little girl has. And then come back and we'll discuss loss of pre-adolescence. Pre-adolescence or early adolescence, we're looking at ages 10 through 12. In this age group, although their understanding of death is shaped by less developed cognitive and coping skills as older adolescents, they do begin to think and consider abstractly about subjects such as eternity, spirituality, heaven and hell. These abstract thoughts now as their brain is developing more and more. Responses during this time. Sometimes develops separation anxiety, can even lose manual dexterity, has difficulty concentrating. Sometimes their grades will suffer at school. It's very important to be in tune to a child at this age, and they can become emotionally distant, not wanting to talk about the event. We'll look at some ways to help in that situation. Interventions, same as others, you certainly want to give honest answers, reassurance, include them as much as possible as they want to be in the funeral arrangements if the loved one is nearby that has passed. You want to encourage them to read age-appropriate books, especially if they're a reader, and we do have some that I'll list later. You'll want to certainly listen. If they're willing to talk, listen to their concerns and be in tune to that. And whatever feelings they have, they may be off the wall, but you want to validate those feelings because they are their feelings as real to them. Video number 3, I'd like you to stop and view. It's a short video, a couple of minutes long, of some children's law stories. This is taken from Camp El Tesoro de la Vida, which means Treasure of Life camp. It's a children's lost camp. And after you view these children in this group appear to be about 10 to 12 years old. And you can see how their understanding is still unclear, but their cognitive ability to understand death as being very real and permanent with their loved ones is seen. And then after you see this, view this, we will continue with the last group, and that is adolescents. The last group we want to consider is that of adolescents, age group being from 13 through 18. And children at this period of their lives are more capable of verbalizing their reactions to loss, but may be reluctant to do so, depending upon the family system that they're from and from the culture from whence they come. As one writer put it, we tend to grieve the way we were taught by family, gender, and cultural models that we had before 10 years of age. At this age, the adolescent is able to view death at an adult level. Death is seen to be universal. It happens to everyone. Responses? They may assume an adult role with younger siblings. They may anger quickly and show aggression very easily. Becomes preoccupied with death. May become suicidal or attempt suicide as a gesture. They may internalize feelings, may have acting out behaviors. Depression, withdrawal may be seen, possible risk-taking behaviors. It's very important to watch the reaction of adolescent during this time, the importance of listening to them, reassuring them, just like pre-adolescents and those before as well. Don't be surprised if they don't want to talk, but just be available is very important during this time. Interventions, you want to be able to listen, be able to provide whatever support you can. Journal writing is appropriate at this age. There are good books that are available that we'll look at and modulate that include some journaling, especially if they enjoy doing that kind of thing anyway. This is a perfect place for that to happen. Scrapbooking may be important. Putting together a book about different events of the loved one's life, maybe some photographs can be included in that. Appropriate books that they may look at and read as to how to help them process through this time. Prepare for reactions to future events as adults, as in with all that grieve, all who grieve. Grief is cyclical. And so even though a child may be very young or maybe an older child, as they get older, those legacy building things that they do at a young age that can be put aside, whether it's a drawing or a picture or a scrapbook, a letter, that can be written, maybe even put away whenever they're young. These things become more and more important as a child develops, has more developed cognitive skills. As they get older and events occur, they can, those things become more and more meaningful. Future events like birthdays, anniversaries, those nodal events, as they're called, graduation, weddings, that will be a reminder and trigger the grief that they had whenever they were younger. Legacy building will be discussed again and modulate. We'll talk more about how to keep those memories. Those children early stage of adolescence, ages 12 to 14, are generally characterized by their ambivalence to almost any situation. As stated in one JAMA article, Journal of the American Medical Association, their consistently inconsistent behavior and fear of public display of emotion typically become exaggerated under the stress of a parent's illness. So, certainly important to be in tune with what's going on in the child's life. So, one last video, I promise. And this is a view of an older adolescent experience in a movie entitled We Bought a Zoo. The entire movie is about grief. The parent, played by Matt Damon, has lost his wife. His wife had died, and so he is experiencing his own stuff. And it's hard for him to be in tune with his children, especially the 12-year-old son in the movie. Both father and son are dealing with the death of Matt Damon's wife. This clip includes scene 23 entitled Let's Shave and scene 24 entitled 20 Seconds of Courage. What I want you to see here is how developed this older adolescent is in the way he deals, in the way he verbalizes, as opposed to, say, a 3 or 4-year-old child who may experience the same grief. And you'll see this in the little sister. She doesn't really have a clue what's going on, it seems. But you'll see the visceral, reactive side of grief of an adolescent boy toward his father. In the second scene, resolution is found when the dad, who has resisted the euthanizing of a sick tiger, who becomes a metaphor, or the tiger becomes a metaphor for his own suffering and his own loss. He just didn't want to let it go. And at the concluding part of the scene, too, he finally gives permission to euthanize the tiger, as he speaks with the caretaker, who is Scarlett Johansson, tells her it's time. So after you view this, come back and we'll have some concluding thoughts. Besides the normal concerns that come with the grieving process, adolescents have other psychological and developmental tasks which they have to deal with as well, according to William Worden. This further complicates their adaptation to the loss. Worden lists these 3 developmental tasks that adolescents must negotiate as they prepare for adulthood. And so, if you think about this, while they're grieving, they are also having to negotiate and maneuver through, navigate these 3 important developmental tasks as a normal adolescent child. And so this further complicates their grief experience, and that might help us to understand why it becomes particularly difficult for adolescents during this time. And Worden takes this from a 1986 study prepared by Fleming and Adolph. And these 3 are these. Number 1, the emotional separation from their parents. They are learning to self-differentiate, gaining their own identity apart from mom and dad. Number 2, the development of mastery and competence. That, I can do this. How many times does adolescents say, I can do this on my own. I don't need help. Number 3, the development of intimacy. as they relate emotionally to other people. And these three things, they learn, number one, that I am different from everyone else, that I can do anything, I can succeed, and that I can trust others to be there for me when needed. All of these developmental tasks may be called into question in the world of the adolescent whenever their world comes tumbling down, when a parent or close grandparent dies. Furthermore, depending on the culture and reactions of their particular family system, the teen may feel conflicted about their own responses to the loss. Alan Wolfeld states in this way, unfortunately, adolescents hear messages from well-intentioned adults such as, keep your chin up, or just keep busy, or carry on. William Wolf Alan Wolfeld cites a story from Steve, an 18-year-old who was reluctant to show emotions following the loss of his mother because of the expectations of the adults around him. He said, when my mom died, I thought my heart would break, but I couldn't cry. Friends and family told Steve to be strong and that he could take it. For Steve, the result of repressing his grief was a feeling of anger, sadness, and isolation. One 13-year-old named Deborah often talked with her mother following the death of her brother, who was killed in a boating accident. She said, we talked about why. Why did he die? And what am I supposed to do? This is from some thoughts from Kenneth Doka for the American Hospice Foundation. After 2 years of coping, Deborah had learned a lot about life and resolved, as she said, all these different stages of feelings you go through are normal and that you are not crazy. Sounds pretty healthy to me. Ralph was 15 when his sister, with whom he was very close, died of cancer. His parents thought he was crazy or something, he said, because I didn't want to talk about her death. He lamented, they all felt that I should feel worse than I did or something. They thought there was something wrong with me because they didn't think I was acting normal. All of these examples are important reminders to those of us who would be adult caregivers to children and adolescents. Each age group processes grief differently, depending on their social, psychological, and cognitive development. Parents, teachers, clergy must consider the myriad of factors when considering how to minister and give pastoral care to children and adolescents. I think a good rule of thumb is taken from a friend of mine by the name of Kim Fryer, who writes, listen, listen, listen. And I love this statement. Listen to understand rather than listen to answer. Boy, that's a good rule of thumb for anyone at any age giving care to someone who's grieving, but especially when we're dealing with children. She also says, if a child is old enough to love, he or she is old enough to grieve. So how young is the child? If they're old enough to love, they're old enough to experience grief in the time of loss. A good rule of thumb for talking to children is to listen to understand rather than listening to answer. As caregivers, we understand the fears of telling the child about their loved one's death, but that it is important to help the child understand what is going on. Children are acutely aware of subtle changes that take place with us and within the family. I mean, imagine cousins coming to visit when they normally come only for Christmas or Easter. Mommy's eyes are red, and the child asks, "Why have you been crying?" Mom or dad closes the door while talking on the phone, or they speak in hushed tones around the child. A preacher or an elder or deacon comes over for a visit, and it's not Sunday. Children are very observant. They know something's going on. It behooves us to communicate with them. Children are always noticing when something is different about their environment or family dynamic. And without information, they will invent their own stories. If family members do not talk to them about the elephant in the room, they will create those stories alone and try to make sense of them alone without the input and support of the adults in their life. They will try to make sense of what is happening, and they'll be alone with their grief and in their grief. Parents really do not want that. But their desire to protect their child by not talking is counterproductive in results. Kim Fryer made this statement once. Important observation as we have here. If a child is old enough to love, he or she is old enough to grieve. We need to remember that as caring adults. Well, that brings us to the end of Module 6. And the learning objectives for this module. Number 1, you'll need to explain the developmental reactions to death by age. I want you to evaluate one of the 4 videos, that is the death of the goldfish, as it relates to concrete language in speaking to children. We'll probably do this in a forum, but I would like for you to be able to articulate how that video helps us to understand how to relate to children. How did he speak to the child, his audience of children, as he spoke about the different things that were going on throughout that whole video, in order to help children to relate to him, to build rapport with them. And third, I think it's important that we at least have knowledge. I want you to describe the 3 psychological and developmental tasks that are concerns for adolescents beyond the normal process of grieving that we discussed. So until next time, God bless. Have a blessed week.